1977. 2007 declaration. 30 years of struggle. 30 years of trying to raise money to get to New York, to get to Geneva, to get to these international meetings where we can identify ourselves as indigenous people. And there was a study done, famous study, those of you that are academics. It was called a study by Martinez Cobo, where the words of indigenous people began to appear in the UN jargon, in the UN papers are being studied. What is an indigenous person? So we came up with what was called a working definition by Martinez Cobo, that indigenous people are those people who still hold on to their culture language, who still live on the territories where their ancestors lived, who still practice the ways of their relation to Mother Earth and to the Creator. So that was the working definition, because we don't want to get into this labeling that happens a lot in the United Nations. And so then we began to build that movement of indigenous peoples up until 2007. And the only thing, remember they called us, when we first came to the United Nations, they said, you're not people, you're populations. That was the position of the capitalist Western powers. On the socialist side of things, Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, Cuba, other places, they said, no, you're not Lakota, you're not peoples, you're ethnic minorities. Nobody said we was indigenous peoples until Martinez Cobo began to work with that phrase. So we used that in order to unify who we were as indigenous people. And the United Nations refused to deal with the issue of the socialist bloc. That's one thing we had in common with them. They were talking in terms of collective rights. The Western bloc, the United States and Western Europe, all they talk about is individual rights. So right away we had a clash of cultures. So we had to work through that through the years. To show United Nations and their agencies, we had to work through that through the years. To show United Nations and their agencies that we were distinct peoples who had our own creation stories, who have our own languages, who have our own territories, who have the ability to enter into relations with other governments. Those are the 4 criteria for the nation status. That's the principles that we learned and we got promoted in nations by people like our Guatemalan friend, whose name was Augusto Williamson Diaz. He recently passed away. He was one of the highest level within the human rights as a person of research, a person in the staff of the UN who studied a lot of the indigenous people's issues from around the world. He's from Guatemala. But he's the one who would say, let's try that door back there, because if we go through this door, the United States is going to block us. If we go through this door over here, Soviet Union is going to block us. But if we choose that one down there, the human rights door, I think we're going to find our way through the maze. We're going to go with the issue of human rights because all humans are born into this world with certain inalienable rights. Nobody can give you human rights. You're born with human rights. Augusto saw that. He said, that's how we're going to make it through this bureaucracy. Somebody said, largest bureaucracy in the world, the United Nations. But we have a long way to get our way through so that we can walk without getting lost. When we first went to Geneva, man, we get lost in that building all the time. Because we moved the offices around like BIA. You go in or BIA. Almost every country where they have indigenous peoples who have land, they have a bureau that represents the government policy to the Indian communities or indigenous communities. We have BIA. So now what I want to say as a warning to all of you, this movement was not started by the BIA, was not started by tribal governments, was not started by the United States government, was not started by the churches, was not started by the corporations, was started by indigenous peoples. So all this work we've been doing for 40-some years, it has to stay with the indigenous peoples, the grassroots, the treaty people, the traditional people, the ones that speak their language, the ones that's living on the land. Why? Because now, after 41 years of work, all of a sudden, the BIAs of the world are beginning to appear in the halls of